There are some very astute travel pundits out there who believe that Australia escaped a greater COVID disaster because of the bushfires that came in the early part of the year. Quentin Long from Australian Traveller magazine argues that when the fires hit, a huge number of cancellations were made by Chinese travel companies, which reduced the influx of potential spreaders. To talk about that and Australia's huge thirst at the moment for domestic travel, I spoke with Quentin Long a little earlier today. Quentin Long, thank you very much for your time.
G'day, Smithy. Great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Now, I want to start with the impact that the bushfires may have had on the reduction in COVID infections that we've had in Australia. You've been, you got your ear to the ground in terms of the tourism industry. What was happening at bushfire time in January this year?
Yeah, well, it's actually got some validity if you think about it. From the 1st of January, cancellations started flooding into Australia. People started cancelling their holidays, and there was the Chinese, it was the Brits, it was the Americans. And so there is some validity to the idea that perhaps we dodged a bit of a bullet with those cancellations. So, out of this black cloud, a little bit of a silver lining. I wish we didn't have it, but probably some validity in that idea.
Wow. So we've probably had less spreaders of the virus because of the bushfires, so there was a consolation in all of that. Well, maybe that's played a part. I want to talk about the trend right now. Big stories around today about everything being booked out. We're travelling everywhere, intrastate, interstate. How are Australians handling the summer in terms of holiday bookings?
Mate, in unprecedented times, we're having unprecedented demand, and it's just showing you how many Australians usually travel overseas because there's so much demand now on the domestic landscape. It's fantastic for domestic operators. There is a bit of a price increase, and look, I've got to say, I haven't seen any price gouging, and you've got to remember also that our domestic operators have been operating without any revenue for about 9 months, and it's been really, really tough. So it's good to see them getting some money in their tills, which I'm really happy about. There is a lot of demand, and if you're looking for somewhere to go, you've got to start looking inland from now on, or our cities. You're starting to see the cities have been hurting for a long time. They don't have those business travellers and they don't have those international travellers. So you're starting to see some great deals within our cities. I've seen some deals around 5-star hotels that are really at 4, 3.5-star prices. So some good finds to be had there. And if you're looking, inland, for example, in New South Wales, I know that places like Bathurst and Mudgee have some availability in that sort of Boxing Day to New Year's Day period. So you can still find it. You've got to be a bit lucky. You've got to swoop on it as we speak.
What are your thoughts on the government's decision earlier this week about the cruise industry? A blow for that sector, of course.
Yeah, look, our government's getting very, very conservative. I do understand why, but I do actually feel like the cruise industry has been a bit mistreated. When this all kicked off, we had P&O just kicked out of the country with 5 days' notice. And that was really unfortunate is probably one way to put it, but also I think not a very nice way to deal with a company that has been so loyal to Australia. And then you've seen, the cases come down and down and down. There is a case for letting the ships back in now, getting them to quarantine in Australian waters. They've even been proposing to just do New South Wales cruises for New South Wales guests, Queensland cruises for Queensland guests, and so on and so forth. So they're really trying hard. I'd like to see the government engage more with the industry and actually have a look at what they're proposing, because I think it would work. And if you look at all the demand that is out there now, it would help alleviate some of that pressure and put some downward pressure on prices. I think, this will be the last extension of this ban, because the government is starting to look pretty hard at what the cruise lines have done. There was that unfortunate incident in Singapore just, a couple of days ago. Turns out that was a false positive. So there wasn't a case on board that Royal Caribbean ship. What was really, really heartening to see out of that was their protocols worked. They went straight into the protocols. They returned the ship. Everything was done magnificently. So in many, many ways, that was their 3rd cruise since resuming in Singapore. In many ways, it was great to have this dry run to show that the protocols are working. There's lots that they've done to make sure that people will be safe on cruise ships. The industry has done a phenomenal amount, and I'd love to see the government try to give them a better hearing.
Yeah, there's got to be a way to make that happen, seeing that we've negotiated and come up with a middle ground in just about every kind of major event, sport, etc. I want to ask you probably a federal government-oriented question about getting Australians back. There are, I think the list is now 39,000. The list has actually grown. We're still bringing in thousands, of course, to try and get them back for Christmas. But I guess with quarantine, they've got to quarantine for 14 days. It's almost too late now, isn't it?
It is, and it's a really, really difficult, situation where you start with one problem, the problem doubles and then triples before you actually get to solve the original problem. And I have some sympathy for the government around that, because it is very, very difficult. But I would like to see, I think we need to just charter more aircraft and find ways to quarantine people. The Darwin solution, I think, is actually probably the best one, which is fly everyone to Darwin, have them quarantine in Darwin, and then sort of bring them back to the home ports from there. As we did right at the very beginning. We did that at the beginning, Absolutely. I mean, we have space here in Australia. We know where to put people if we need to. And I just think that we really are letting down our international citizens who are really desperate to come home to be able to just get them home really, really quickly and safely. We can do it. We just need a bit more political will. Now, what do you know about this famous seaplane company that's decided to go all electric? That was a story hovering around today. Yeah, that's pretty amazing. Good to see. There's some benefits to it. Obviously, what happens is it actually brings down prices because the engines last 3 times as long. You have no fuel costs, and therefore the pricing all comes down. So the problem with the electric engines is they don't have enough thrust, so they can't be used in large aircraft yet. But you've got to start somewhere. So it's great to see Sydney Seaplanes. They're going to roll out a complete electric fleet by 2023. They're giving it a bit of a trial now. It's also a much better ride. It's a lot quieter. And so actually could be the future of aviation. Travel back on the agenda again. That's got to be a good thing. Thank you, mate. Much appreciated. Mate, great to be with you, Smithy. You have a great Christmas if I don't see you beforehand. Same to you and the family too.